I've always been the kind of student who avoided confusion. During breaks, I preferred to stay in the corridors or near the library, especially when the courtyard was too full. That day, I was alone upstairs, near the classrooms of the old wing of the school, where there is usually no one at recess. That's when I heard 3 dry knocks coming from one of the locked rooms. At the time, I imagined that someone could have been trapped by accident, or even that it was some stupid joke, since that part of the building had a reputation for haunted among the students. But the beats were repeated with a strange interval, as if it were a code. I thought it was too weird to ignore, so I went after someone from the coordination. I managed to find Paolo, one of the inspectors, and explained what I had heard. He came with me to the hallway and unlocked the room, the door creaky in that typical old school way, and for a moment it gave me a stupid chill, one of those that we feel without knowing why. The room was completely empty. The wallets were all in place, the light off, and no open window that could have caused any noise. Paolo looked for a few seconds and said something like, "It must have been the echo of something down there." And he locked the door again, as if nothing had happened. I went back downstairs a little uncomfortable, but trying to forget the subject. But in the middle of the last morning class, I received a message on my cell phone from an unknown number. The strangest thing was that there was no text, just a photo. I opened it, thinking it was spam or someone from the class making fun, but I almost dropped my cell phone when I saw what it was. The image showed exactly the interior of that locked room where Paolo and I had entered. It was a photo taken from the inside, with the light off and a strange focus coming from the door, as if someone had photographed it right after it was opened. The most bizarre thing is that, in addition to the image being perfectly framed, it showed one of the wallets facing the corner of the room, which was definitely not like that when we entered. I stared at the photo for a while, trying to find some detail that would explain that, like reflection, assembly, anything. But it was a very real image, and the number you sent had no saved name, no profile picture. I replied with a "Who is it?" but the message was only with a tick. At this point, I already had that cold in my stomach that we feel when we know that something is not right. On the way out, I went straight to the gate, but before leaving I still decided to take one last look at that room. I went there alone, with my heart beating fast, trying to act as if it was just curiosity. When I got to the door, I realized that it was still locked, but now it had a kind of whitish mark on the doorknob, as if someone had held it there with a wet or sweaty hand. I stood still for a few seconds, looking around to see if there was anyone else in the hallway, but the floor was completely empty. That part of the school was always silent after 4 p.m. That night at home, I showed the photo to my sister. She's older and was always skeptical. She thought I was being the victim of some joke. But even so, when she zoomed in on the image, she was silent for a while. There was something weird in the background of the photo, almost imperceptible, as if there was a human shadow crouched next to the closet in the corner of the room. You couldn't see a face or details, but it seemed to have a silhouette, and I swear that wasn't there when we entered. That left me awake for hours, trying to remember if someone could have gone unnoticed, but it didn't make sense. I had entered with the inspector. The room was empty. The next day, I showed the image to Paolo. He turned white at the time. He said he had received the same message during the night, but he didn't want to comment with me because he thought it was someone making fun of us. But what he received was even worse. In addition to the same photo, the number sent a second image. It was from the living room again, but this time it seemed taken from above, as if someone was on the ceiling. In it, you could clearly see me and him entering the room the day before, right at the moment we opened the door. It gave me such a strong chill that I even felt a bad taste in my mouth, like rust. We tried to check with the coordinator if there was any camera in there, but he assured that no classroom has a camera installed, only in the common areas. Still, we insist that someone could have put some hidden, maybe some teacher or another student wanting to play a trick. But when he asked to see the image, I got stuck. I didn't want to show it to anyone else. It was as if, by sharing it with someone else, the thing became more real. Paolo also seemed to think the same thing, because he ended up talking. We decided that it would be better to forget, delete the photos, follow life. But forgetting that was impossible. From that week on, every time I passed near that room, even locked, I felt a strange weight in the air. It was as if the corridor got colder, as if the sound of my steps changed. Even Paolo began to avoid that path. There was a day when he called me in the middle of class just to ask if I had also dreamed of the room. In his dream, we entered, but we could never get out. I had also had a similar nightmare, but with something else. In mine, someone called me from inside the room, using my voice. We decided, kind of without saying it out loud, that we didn't want to get involved in that anymore. We stood commenting on the subject, blocked the number that sent the messages, and deleted the photos. But even so, from time to time, someone commented on hearing knocks on the door, on seeing the doorknob moving by itself. One of the employees swore that, one afternoon, he saw a light on inside, even without anyone with the key. After that, the school decided to temporarily seal the room. And, to be very honest, I felt relieved. It was as if, by locking it, they were trying to contain something that should never have been opened. The problem is that not everything is locked outside. A month later, during physics class, I received a new message. No text, no number. Just a picture. It was from my wallet, empty, as if it had been taken out before I got to the room that day. But no one saw anyone taking a picture, no one saw anything strange. Paolo also received it. This time, it was a photo of himself, leaning against the drinking fountain. The image seemed recent, but taken from very close. So close that you could see the photographer's reflection in his eyes, and it wasn't anyone we knew. Since then, we've never talked about it again. We finished high school and followed different paths. But until today, every time I receive a notification on my cell phone without a name, my stomach turns. And there's something I've never told anyone. Sometimes, late at night, I get calls from an unknown number. When I answer, there's no one on the other side, just the sound of a door opening and someone breathing very close to the microphone. The only certainty I have is that, as much as that room is locked, something that started there still follows me. I never paid much attention to strange things at school. I've always been skeptical, the kind that thinks everything has a logical explanation. But that day, during geography class, something happened that made me rethink it. It was an ordinary Tuesday, second morning class. We were all a little sleepy, paying half the attention, when the room intercom started to squeal. At first, I thought it was some warning from the management, but no one said anything, just that low, kind of metallic hiss that started to bother everyone. The teacher approached to turn it off, thinking it was just interference or some problem in the system, but even before touching the device, the sound changed. Suddenly, a voice began to whisper something. It was low, dragged, as if it were very close to the microphone, but I couldn't understand the words. The room was silent at the time. Everyone stopped what they were doing and kept looking at the intercom, hoping it was a prank or some bizarre warning from the coordination. But the teacher's face said something else. He was pale, and you could see that it wasn't normal even for him. He tried to turn it off again, pressing the buttons harder, but the voice continued. But now it seemed a little clearer, as if she was gaining courage to speak louder. A colleague of mine, who was sitting very close to the speaker, said she thought she heard someone call her name. We laughed nervously, thinking she was joking, but then someone else swore he heard her own name too. And then I heard mine. It was only for a second, almost like a whisper mixed with hiss, but it was my voice being called. At that moment, no one else thought it was funny. After a couple of minutes that seemed much longer, the intercom stopped out of nowhere. Total silence. The teacher, visibly disconcerted, said he was going to the direction to check what was happening. He left the room, and, when he came back after about 15 minutes, it seemed even stranger. He said that no one at the management knew anything and that, according to the secretary, the sound system had been down since the beginning of the day because of maintenance. This left the whole room in shock. What do you mean off the air? We heard it clearly. Everyone was there. You couldn't invent something like that in a group. That day, when class ended, almost no one wanted to stay at school. I left straight away myself, with that weird feeling in my stomach. At home, I tried to forget, but at night I couldn't stop thinking about what I had heard. I kept repeating the sound in my head, trying to remember if I had really heard my name, or if it was just a suggestion. But the more I remembered, the more sure I was that it was my voice being called. And that kept hammering on me, as if it hadn't ended there. The next day, everyone avoided commenting. But one of the colleagues, Diego, said softly to me that he had received an anonymous call from a restricted number that morning. When he answered, he only heard that same hiss. After that, we started to notice some strange things at school. Like, the room where everything happened was locked for a few days. They said it was for maintenance, but no one saw anyone working there. The sound box in the room was removed, and they put a new one. Even so, sometimes we thought we heard a sound click coming from there, as if the system turned on by itself. It never happened again with the same intensity that day, but most of the class swore that something strange had been activated there. And the weirdest thing is that, on another day weeks later, a new student joined our class and, right in the first week, said she heard her name coming from the speaker. She didn't even know what had happened before. And then everything came back to the fore. The school never officially assumed anything. The director said it must have been an electrical problem, or some old recording leaking from the system, which doesn't make any sense. We even looked for someone from maintenance, and one of the guys said that that type of intercom didn't even record audio. It was all live, without any storage function. That gave me chills. Because even with the weak explanation of the board, everything pointed to the opposite. It was as if something, or someone was trying to communicate from inside the school. And if it was really my name that was called, why? Today it's been more than 2 years, but I still dream of that sound sometimes. It's always the same way. I'm alone in the living room, all silent, and suddenly the hiss begins, and the voice calls me. I wake up in the middle of the night, sweating, with that feeling that you are still around. It may seem like nonsense, but I could never look at those school speakers the same way. I always wonder, what if it wasn't a defect? What if there was someone, or something, trying to express themselves from that place? I have no answer, but I know what I heard, and I know I'll never forget again. I was never one to get scared easily, but what happened to me that Friday at school left me with a fear that to this day I can't explain. It was around 2 in the afternoon, during a free class. I asked to go to the bathroom, and decided to go to the farthest block of the school, where almost no one used the facilities, mainly because the bathrooms there were cleaner and quieter. The place always had a kind of forgotten air, you know? Those tiles yellowed by time, the smell of strong disinfectant, and the light half oscillating on the ceiling. But since I had already been there other times without a problem, I was calm. I barely entered, and went to the last box when I heard the discharge of another being triggered. I found it strange, because I hadn't seen or heard anyone coming in with me. I stood still for a few seconds, trying to hear footsteps. And I heard someone calmly leaving one of the pits, stepping on the wet floor. I left mine immediately and went to the sink, hoping to see who it was, maybe some student also running away from classes. But the bathroom door didn't open. No one left. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the marks, 2 hands spread, as if someone had pressed hard on the glass minutes before. But the strange thing is that they were wet, as if they had been made now. And I was still alone. I left the bathroom with my heart racing, trying to find a logical explanation. I went back to the room and tried to forget, but the feeling of being watched didn't pass the rest of the day. When the signal hit, I decided to go back there, as if something inside me wanted to confirm that I hadn't imagined everything. The corridor was even emptier than before, and the light at the end of it, near the bathroom, flashed with an annoying frequency. I entered again, hesitating a little. The boxes were all open, except one, the same one that was closed inside before. I approached, and the door was still locked. That's when I noticed something even stranger. There were drops of water leading from the sink to that box, as if someone wet had walked there. The hand marks on the mirror had already dried, but now there was a new one, still dripping. I don't know why I did this, but I called out loud, "Is there anyone there?" No answer. It was only when I turned to leave that I heard, very clearly, the noise of something scratching the other side of the closed door, like nails scraping slowly on the wood. It looked like a provocation. I ran out of there as if my life depended on it. I ran straight to the exit of that block, without looking back. The adrenaline was so high that I didn't even realize that I dropped my notebook on the way. I only noticed when I was already outside, near the main courtyard. Going back there was out of the question, but that notebook had the entire biology test written down, and I needed it. I waited about 20 minutes until the movement returned to normal with the class change, and I went there with a friend. I tried not to look scared, but he noticed that I was a little pale and asked what had happened. I couldn't explain it properly. I just asked him to stay at the door while I came in. When I got to the bathroom again, the boxes were all open, including the one that was locked before. Inside it, my notebook was thrown on the floor, with one of the leaves torn and crumpled in the corner. I took it quickly and left. I didn't say anything to my friend, but when I got home that night and went to review the notes, the torn sheet had been put back in the middle of the notebook, only folded and written with something strange. It wasn't my handwriting, nor anyone from the school I knew. The message said, "Don't come in here again." Until today, I've never told this to anyone in person. This story happened in my last year of high school, on any afternoon when I and 3 other colleagues decided to enter one of the unoccupied classrooms of the school. to kill time between one class and another. It was common to do this there, mainly because some rooms were open and no one from the coordination seemed to care much. The room we chose was in the old block, the one that the crowd always said had some weird energy, but we never gave a ball for that. We went in, threw the backpacks on the desks, and started talking, laughing and complaining about the teacher who was missing. We were sitting closer to the corner, near the window, when we heard that typical noise of a chair being dragged. It was clear, that iron brake on the floor that even gives a chill. We turned to look and saw one of the chairs at the back of the room a little out of place, as if someone had pushed it slightly back. We laughed, of course, thinking that someone had kicked us unintentionally, or that it was a draft. The back window was ajar. But when we approached to see, we noticed that no one had even come close to that part of the room, and the chair was turned as if someone had just gotten up. One of my friends went there, half laughing, half curious, and pushed the chair back to the place. We joked, saying that it was the ghost of the failed student, and we kept talking as if nothing had happened. But it didn't even take 2 minutes for the chair to move again, this time harder, sliding a good 30 centimeters on the floor, with that annoying noise of scraping metal. This time, silence took over. No one laughed. We just looked at each other, trying to understand if someone was playing a trick. But there was no one else in the room besides the four of us, and everyone was standing. My first impulse was to check if there was any wire, something stuck. The chair was completely loose, without any explanation. It was then that one of the girls who was with us commented that her brother had already talked about this room. According to him, years ago, a student had been sick there and died before the ambulance arrived. The management would have muffled the case, and since then, no one else wanted to teach there. We always thought it was an invented story of an older student, but at that moment, with that strange climate in the air, it sounded much more real than it should. We decided to leave the room. Nobody said anything, but everyone got up at the same time, as if a silent agreement had happened. When we were almost at the door, we heard a loud pop coming from the corner of the room, as if someone had hit the wall hard. One of the windows cracked, and that was enough for us to run away. We went straight to the common area, trying to act as if nothing had happened, but it was on the face that everyone was shaken. The nervous laughter, the suspicious looks, no one could really relax after that. The next day we passed by that room again. The door was locked, and inside you could see the chair turned on the floor, right in the same corner where it had all started. We discreetly asked one of the employees if they still used that room, and she just said, "No, that room is closed." But no one explained why. To this day, whenever I pass through that corridor, I avoid even looking to the side. There's something wrong in there, and no matter how much they try to hide it, we know what we saw. The school may pretend it was a coincidence, but those who were there that afternoon know it wasn't. That morning, the class was going normally, no big deal. It was a Wednesday, second class of the day. I remember this because I had just taken the exam and was just trying to survive until the break. The room was full, everyone was kind of bored, until Marina, who was sitting in the back, raised her hand and asked loudly, "Whose backpack is this back here?" We turned to look, and there it was, a black backpack, a little slate, leaning against the wall near the closet. No one had noticed her entering, no one saw anyone leaving there. The teacher even thought it was from someone from the previous class, but when he took the backpack and asked again, no one came forward. So he decided to open it to see if he had any identification, I don't know, a notebook with a name. What came next was the strangest. Inside the backpack there were old things, like very old. A yellow school report card dated more than 10 years ago, pens that are not even used anymore, and the most bizarre several photos. But they weren't random photos. They were photos of us, of the students in the room, only when we were children. Some even seemed taken inside the school, but no one remembered having taken that. The first reaction was nervous laughter. Everyone thought it was some prank, maybe from someone in the class to play a trick. But the more we looked at those photos, the weirder it got. Some were from moments that no one remembered, like Joao in the school playground, but we never had a playground, at least not in the years we are there. Another showed Larissa in the corridor of the old block, which was demolished before we even entered high school. There was even one of Pedro crying, very small, in a room with furniture that no one recognized. The atmosphere of the room has changed. The teacher became visibly uncomfortable and decided to take the backpack for coordination. But before that, he asked if anyone wanted to accompany, and the silence was general. No one wanted to touch that backpack again. One of the girls, ISA, started to feel sick, saying that she recognized the background of one of the photos as being from her old house, one that caught fire when she was little. We thought it was an exaggeration, but her expression said something else. She was pale, with trembling hands, and had to leave the room. That's when a real fear began to hit. The teacher took the backpack to the coordination, and we were waiting for some kind of explanation, maybe a joke from another shift, something left by mistake, I don't know. But nothing was clarified. In the last class of the day, the principal entered the room and, in a very dry way, said that the backpack had been discarded, and that we should not worry about that. That only made everything weirder. If it was something normal, why just discard it? And why act as if nothing had happened, when clearly something unusual happened? In the following days, everyone became a little paranoid. Isa stopped coming to school for a while. When he came back, he avoided looking back during classes, as if he was afraid of seeing something. The most bizarre thing happened a week later. Another backpack, similar to the first one, appeared in a room upstairs. The director acted the same way. She withdrew and didn't want to comment. But this time, someone managed to take a picture before it disappeared with everything. And what appeared in the image gives me goosebumps to this day. One of the photos that were inside the backpack showed us, in that same room, looking at the backpack. As if someone was there, taking the photo, before everything happened. After that, my mother forced me to change shifts. She said it was just as a precaution, but I knew she was scared too. The school never officially commented on anything. Everything was swept under the carpet as if it were our imagination. But the atmosphere inside the school has changed. Several students began to have anxiety crises, people asking for transfer. And whenever someone tried to touch on the subject with an employee, the answer was evasive, as if there was some prohibition to talk about it. To this day, no one knows who brought those backpacks, where the photos came from, or how someone could have such specific and old images, that not even the students themselves remembered taking them. Sometimes, I find myself looking at the back of the room just to make sure there's nothing there. I don't know if it was someone trying to play a trick, or if it was something worse. But I know that, since that day, no one else felt totally at ease inside the school. I was never one to pay much attention in class, but I always noticed the people around me. I used to sit closer to the back of the room, a little away, so I ended up noticing who was there or not. That week in particular, I remember that the class was more agitated because the history teacher had returned from a leave, and it was her first day with us that semester. She started the class normally, making the call, reading the names one by one out loud. When she called a name that I couldn't hear right, a boy from the bottom answered, "Present," with a firm voice. I looked by reflex and saw a boy sitting 2 rows behind me, leaning near the window. I didn't find it strange at the time, I just didn't remember seeing him before. The room was full, and sometimes new students show up without warning. But what took me by surprise was that the teacher frowned and looked at the list again, as if something was wrong. She hesitated but moved on. During the break, I told a friend about the new boy. She looked at me confused and said there was no one sitting there. I insisted. I described him: dark hair, half-frizzled uniform, and a blue backpack with a hanging keychain. She looked at me as if I was joking. "That place was empty," she replied. I was a little disconcerted, because I was sure of what I had seen, even too much. I even remember that he was with his arms crossed, staring at the front of the room as if he had no interest in class. In the next class, the teacher came back with the call list and commented that she had an error. One more name appeared, handwritten at the end of the sheet. She said she had no idea who it was, and that she was going to talk to the coordination. At that moment, I felt my stomach freeze. It was the same name she had read when the boy answered "Gift." I asked what the name was, and she read it aloud, but no one recognized it. It was as if that name had come out of nowhere, just to be there that day. After class, I went to the office to ask about the name that appeared on the list. The employee searched the system in physical folders, but did not find any registration record with that name. She even asked me if I was sure I heard it right. I left there even more confused. When I returned to the living room, I noticed something strange. The place where the boy had sat was completely clean, as if no one had used it. No backpack marks on the floor, no chairs out of place. Unlike the other wallets that had clear signs of use. Later, already at home, I decided to review some photos I took at the beginning of class, to show a drawing on the board. In one of them, at a glance, you can see the back of the room. I enlarged the image as much as I could, and there he was, sitting, head down, as if he didn't want to be noticed. But when I showed the same photo to a classmate, the boy just didn't appear in his image. He swore to me that he was seeing the same photo I had sent, but that the back of the room was empty. That terrified me. I took my cell phone again and compared the two photos side by side, mine and the one I sent. The difference was clear. In my gallery, the boy was there. In the image sent by message, the same space was empty. I tried to resend, take a screenshot, even show it live to other people. Whenever I showed it directly from my cell phone, it appeared. But if I sent it through any app, the place would be empty. I had never seen anything like it. The next day, I arrived early and went straight to the room. The place where he sat was occupied by someone else, a new boy who had actually enrolled that morning. But it was someone else. It wasn't the same boy I had seen. I was watching all the time, waiting for some reaction, some repetition. But nothing happened. During the rest of the week, the name that had appeared on the list was removed. The teacher said it must have been a printing error. No one else mentioned the subject. A few weeks later, I learned that that room had already been used by another class years ago, and that there was an accident involving a student, exactly a boy with the same name who appeared on the call. According to an older employee, he died in an accidental fire inside the school itself, in an improvised laboratory that was in the old back room, which is now used as a warehouse. I don't know if what I saw was the result of my imagination, but everything that happened matches the reports I heard. To this day, I wonder if that was a request for help or just a repetition, a presence that is still there, trying to be noticed. I never saw that boy again, nor did I have another strange experience at school. But every time I passed through the door of that room, I looked twice, as if I expected to hear someone saying gift again, even if it's not on the list. That day, the teacher was late, and we spent a long time alone in the classroom. It was one of those drag Monday mornings when no one wants to be there. One of the guys in the background, Leo, raised and wrote a stupid joke on the board, something like "This class is a punishment from beyond." Everyone laughed, even if it was boring. It was just a way to pass the time until the teacher showed up. I was right in the first row, fiddling with my cell phone, but I remember looking at the board and reading the sentence again, while he went back to his chair. The strange thing was that, about 2 or 3 minutes later, we heard a slight noise, like the sound of the eraser dragging on the board. But no one was standing. I looked straight at the board and saw the phrase being erased by itself, letter by letter, as if someone invisible was there in front. I swear by everything I was paralyzed. We couldn't pretend it was wind or something like that. It was as if the rubber was being held by a hand that we couldn't see. When the phrase disappeared completely, a new one appeared in cursive letters, very different from Leo's. "Don't write this again." The room was silent for a few seconds. The kind of strange, heavy silence, as if no one knew how to react. The first to speak was Bia, who was closer to the board. She asked if anyone had seen that happen, or if we were going crazy collectively. But there wasn't much to discuss. Everyone was looking at that time. Leo tried to laugh, like there must be someone making fun of us, but his laughter came out forced. There was no way anyone could have written that without us seeing it. No one got out of the chair, and the living room only had one entrance. The door was also closed all the time. The teacher arrived shortly after, with the face of someone who had no idea what was happening. When he saw the painting, he stopped for a moment. He asked who had written that, and was a little uncomfortable when no one answered. 1 or 2 colleagues tried to explain, but it sounded so absurd that he didn't even care. He deleted the message with his hand, as if he didn't want to argue, and began to teach normally. But I saw when he looked back at the blackboard after writing the article. He didn't say anything, but he kept staring as if he expected something else to happen. The rest of the class was a little dragged. No one was really paying attention. The weather got strange, really heavy, as if everyone was uncomfortable, waiting for something to happen again. When the signal hit, we left little by little, but no one wanted to stay last. I ended up forgetting my pencil case, and quickly returned to the living room alone. When I entered, I felt a cold out of nowhere, as if they had turned on the air conditioning at maximum, but the device was turned off. The board was clean, but the eraser was no longer in place. It was on the floor, right in the corner of the room. I took my pencil case and almost ran away. After that day, we still commented a few times about what happened, but over time, the subject was getting aside. But a few weeks later, a friend of mine called me in private and asked if I remembered what was written on the board. She sent me a photo of her notebook, and I swear by everything. In the middle of that day's class notes, the phrase "Don't write this again" appeared, written with a completely different letter from hers, and she didn't even remember writing that down. After she sent me that photo, I kept it in my head for days. I started to notice more around, and I swear that twice I saw the eraser fallen on the floor when I entered the room. Nobody seemed to care much, but that was making me uneasy. One day before class, I arrived earlier on purpose. The room was still empty, and the painting was clean. I took a pen and wrote discreetly in the lower corner, "Are you there?" I didn't tell anyone. When I returned to my place, I sat down. I waited for the others to arrive. The class went normally, but in the end, when the teacher left and I went to look again, the sentence had been erased. Only mine, the rest was still there. I don't know what exactly happened in that room. It may have been some very well-made prank, or, I don't know, something that can't be explained. I never tried to write anything on the board again, nor did I arrive early again. But every time I go in there, I have the feeling that there is someone else around. Not a colleague, nor an employee. Something quiet, watching. Until today, no one has officially said anything, but I've heard some strange comments from other students about that room. And honestly, I don't doubt anything anymore. This happened about a year ago, when I was still giving volunteer classes in a public school in my city. I offered math reinforcement at the end of the day, usually after 6 p.m., for anyone who wanted to. On that specific day, only one student showed up, Gabriel, a quiet boy but very hardworking. We met in one of the rooms at the back of the building, since most of the others were locked. I remember that it was very dark outside, with that typical silence of an empty school at night, which already gives a kind of strange feeling in itself. We were solving some issues when, out of nowhere, we both looked at the door at the same time. The frosted glass window that overlooked the corridor showed a shadow passing by. It was fast, but it was clearly the silhouette of someone walking outside. The curious thing is that we didn't hear footsteps. I got up and went to the door thinking it was some employee or another law student. But when I opened it, everything outside was completely dark. The corridor lights had already been turned off. Even the room clock marked 6:47 p.m., and I remembered that the caretaker turned off everything at 6:30 p.m. sharp. I still tried to turn on the hallway lights, but the switch didn't respond. Gabriel came to the door, a little hesitant, and kept looking at the darkness of the corridor as if waiting for someone to appear. I asked if he had seen the same as me, the shadow passing. He confirmed with his head, a little pale. I tried not to show nervousness, but inside I already had that strange cold in my stomach, as if something just didn't make sense. No one should be there. The building was already closed to the external public, and only the watchman was outside, at the entrance guardhouse. I decided to leave the door open just in case. We sat down again, but the weather had already completely changed. The room, which used to seem quiet, now seemed tight, stuffy. The sound of the chalk on the blackboard and the leaves being turned became louder than usual, as if it had an echo. It was then that the shadow passed again, this time faster, in the opposite direction. Only now, the door was open, and there was no one in the hallway. I ran there and looked both ways. No sound, no presence. Just that dense darkness and the distant sound of the street, muffled by the old school windows. I started to wonder if it wasn't someone playing tricks, maybe another student who was hiding, or even some employee. But, honestly, it didn't make much sense. The school had few internal accesses, and all the side gates were already locked. I had seen this myself when I arrived. Gabriel, visibly annoyed, asked if he could leave. I hesitated, but I said yes. We decided to close the reinforcement there. He arranged things quickly, and we left the room together, walking down the corridor with my cell phone's flashlight illuminating the path. That's when I noticed that one of the other doors, which were all locked, was now ajar. It was a room that no one used since the beginning of the semester, as long as I knew. The handle was turned and there was a weak creak, as if it had been forced a short time ago. Gabriel stood behind me, clearly scared. I approached and pushed the door cautiously. Everything was dark inside, but the flashlight revealed some misaligned wallets, an erased blackboard, and a closet in the background, which was open too. That kind of old wooden cabinet, which the school kept leaning against a corner. There was something about him that made me uncomfortable, as if there was someone in there. But when I opened it, there was nothing. Nothing visible, at least. After that, we left the room without saying much. Gabriel didn't want to walk alone anymore, so I accompanied him to the exit. When we passed through the courtyard, something caught my attention. One of the windows on the second floor, precisely in the room where we had reinforced, was open. I was absolutely sure that it was closed when we left. I looked for a few seconds, hoping to see some movement, but there was no one. only the curtain cloth moving slightly, as if someone had just left there. It was impossible to reach this window from the outside. And inside, the only person who had the key to the room was me. The following week, I decided to comment on what happened to another older teacher. I thought he was going to laugh or doubt, but instead he was thoughtful. He said that years ago, a cleaning employee asked for a shift transfer after claiming that she saw someone watching from the same room at night, even with the building locked. That story had been forgotten over time, treated as an exaggeration. But after that, I could never be alone in that part of the school without feeling watched. I could never explain what that shadow was, why the window appeared open, or who turned off the lights. I just know that something in there is still moving when no one sees it. That afternoon, we stayed at school until later because of a group work. The library was practically empty, just us and 2 other students at another table. It was one of those old libraries with high shelves, heavy curtains, and dim lighting in the background. The librarian had already warned that she would leave a little earlier and asked us not to make a mess. We were too focused, but for some reason, the environment was weird, too silent, until Breno, one of our friends, stopped talking in the middle of a sentence and discreetly pointed to the back part, behind the large curtain in the right corner. He whispered that he was seeing something strange there, and when we looked, there really seemed to be 2 visible feet under the curtain, as if someone was standing back there, motionless. First we thought it could be someone making fun, maybe another student wanting to scare. But the library was practically empty, and no one had passed by us or that way. The silence was so heavy that the sound of the air conditioning seemed too loud. I got up slowly and went to the librarian, who was still in her room. When we got back together, the feet were just not there anymore, and the curtain was still closed. The librarian frowned, pulled the curtain at once, and to our surprise, there was no one there. But on the floor, right in the place where the feet seemed to be, there was a torn notebook sheet, folded in half. When she took it and opened it, she turned pale. He called us singing and showed what was written by hand, with a kind of shaky, almost childish handwriting. Silence. I'm reading you guys. That shut us up at the time. None of us understood the exact meaning of that sentence, but the way it was written, in that tone, seemed more like a warning than a joke. The librarian told us to leave right after that. I said it was better to finish the work somewhere else, and that I was going to check the cameras later. We collected things in silence, but no one could stop looking at that curtain. The feeling that remained was that there was someone there, watching everything hidden. One of us even commented, already outside the library, that it seemed that that phrase, reading you, was not about what we were writing, but about ourselves, as if something was accompanying us in there. And the worst, the librarian never commented anything afterwards. The next day, we went back to school trying to pretend that nothing had happened, but the tension between us was evident. During the break, Julia tried to bring up the subject with the librarian, asking casually if she had seen something on the cameras. She was visibly uncomfortable. She only said that you couldn't see the back of the room right, because of a blind spot. But you could tell she was hiding something. And the strangest thing was that same week, the library began to close earlier, and no one could use the back part anymore where the curtains were. Later that same week, Breno commented that he had passed in front of the library during the last period and saw a silhouette behind the curtain. He thought it was imagination, but the next day, I saw it too. But it was as if something, or someone was on my back, standing completely motionless. I didn't get close. That area seemed wrong. We started to avoid the library, even with tests coming. That had left a strange mark between us, as if just remembering that phrase, that paper, gave me a tightness in my chest. We never felt calm in that school again. Over time, each of us tried to forget what happened that afternoon in the library, but the memory came back from time to time, especially when we passed through that silent corridor. One day, months later, Julia had to pick up a book for a presentation. When she came back, she was pale. He said that, when pulling one of the volumes from the bookshelf, another paper fell. It was the same type of note, with the same shaky letter, saying, "You're still too noisy. We don't tell anyone." It was like talking about that gave more strength for things to keep appearing. At the end of the year, we all reformed and left that school. But sometimes we still talk about it. The library was renovated some time later. They changed the shelves and removed the curtains. But I always wonder if this was just a coincidence, or if someone else saw the same feet behind the curtain and also received a message they should never have read. To this day, every time I enter a library and see a curtain in the background, my heart speeds up a little, and I find myself looking for a pair of motionless feet on the ground. This happened in my last year of high school, during a common geography class. It was a hot afternoon, one of those in which no one pays much attention, and the room was noisier than usual. I was sitting in the back, a little bored, until a dry sound, like a quick beat, drew attention. It came from the cleaning closet that was leaning against the corridor wall, right next to our living room. At first, I thought it was something falling inside, but soon after came another beat, stronger, and then another. The whole room was silent. The teacher stopped talking and looked at the door. 2 more beats, now rhythmic, as if someone was trying to leave. We kept looking at each other, and someone commented that maybe the caretaker had been stuck inside. He used to keep buckets and cleaning products in that closet, and sometimes locked it outside. The teacher left the room and went to call someone from the coordination. When he returned with an employee, the beatings had stopped. Even so, they unlocked and opened the closet door. But there was no one inside. The strange thing was that the closet wasn't big. It was narrow, deep, but it would barely fit a person standing inside. And even so, you could clearly see marks on the inside of the door, like scratches, made with something metallic or with nails, I don't know. They were at chest height, crossing in several directions, and some were very recent, still with flakes of the peeled paint on the floor. The employee closed quickly and tried to disguise the discomfort, saying that it could have been old vandalism. But those who study there know, no one moves that closet. After that, the class atmosphere got heavy. The teacher tried to continue, but most of them didn't pay attention anymore. One of the students even commented that, days before, he had passed by there later, almost at the end of the shift, and heard something like a low breath coming from inside the closet. He thought it was a thing in his head, but after that no one laughed. The following week, the closet appeared with a yellow tape on the doorknob and a warning: out of use, maintenance. But no one has ever seen anyone fixing anything. Rumors began to circulate among the students. They said that, years ago, a student disappeared on the night shift, and that the last time she was seen was near that closet. None of this is in the official records, of course, but there is always someone who says he knows a former employee, or who has heard something similar from his parents. The worst thing is that, since that day, more people began to report things. Books that fall by themselves, chairs dragging in the next room when it is empty, the sound of something hitting the closet even with it locked. One afternoon, a cleaning employee asked to change the area. He said he didn't want to be near that school wing anymore, especially at the end of business hours. She spoke with all the letters that she had seen a hand pushing the closet door inside. No one took it very seriously at first, until she delivered a certificate and disappeared for a while. The management had a new padlock installed in the closet, one of those big ones, and no one else had access. But from time to time, you can still hear a muffled noise coming from inside. I graduated from that school, and to this day, when I pass by there, I avoid looking at that door. I've never seen them open again, and she's still with the same padlock, a little rusty but firm. The strangest thing is that, in one of my last days before leaving, I went to the office and saw that the locker number had been removed from the school plan, as if he officially didn't exist anymore. No new class uses that room, even though it is in good condition. It was simply forgotten there, as if it were better that way. To this day, I don't know exactly what was inside that closet. It may have been just a coincidence, something in our head, or some poorly told story from the past. But if you study in an old school, one of those with quiet corridors and lockers that no one has opened for years, pay attention to the sounds. Because sometimes what seems like just a random beat, it can be someone trying to get out. In high school, I used to stay late at school to finish work in the computer room. My computer at home was terrible, so I took advantage of the fact that the teacher let some of us use the PCs after class. On that particular day, only I stayed. I was trying to finish a geography project that was worth an extra point. The room was silent, only the sound of the fan and the click of the mouse from time to time. I've always been cool with that. It didn't bother to be alone. I remember that I was adjusting some images in PowerPoint when I stopped for a moment, tired, and the screen went black because of the standby mode. In the reflection of the turned-off monitor, there was a silhouette standing behind me. It was a human form, still, as if he was staring at me. I tore fast, my heart racing, but there was no one. The living room door was still leaning, as I had left it. I got up and looked around. I checked even under the tables. I was completely alone there. I tried to convince myself that it was just tiredness or a reflection of something outside, but the bad feeling stayed with me. I went back to the place and decided to finish what was missing right away. About 10 minutes later, the computer started to crash. The screen blinked and froze in the slide image. I pressed the restart button, and when the screen lit up again for a second, exactly the same image of the reflection appeared. The figure standing behind me. It was fast like a frame, and it disappeared. But it was clear. It was as if someone had taken a picture of that and put it as a background. I strammed. I kept looking at the monitor waiting for something else to happen, but everything went back to normal. This time, I couldn't be calm anymore. I took my things in a hurry, turned off the lights, and left the room almost running. When I passed through the empty corridor, I felt that someone was still watching me. I had the impression that one of the classroom doors further ahead was half open, but I didn't even want to get close to confirm. I left straight and didn't even look back. The next day, I tried to act as if nothing had happened. I told the basics to a friend of mine who also uses the computer room sometimes, just to see if he had ever felt something strange there. He looked at me a little seriously and said that, once, when he was alone finishing an activity, he heard someone typing on another computer, only that all the others were turned off. We were in that nervous laugh, like someone who doesn't want to believe it, but deep down I knew it wasn't a coincidence. Since then, I avoid being in that room alone. The most bizarre thing is that the computer I was using that day now lives with problems. It keeps crashing or restarting out of nowhere, and they've already changed it twice, but it always malfunctions again. And the strangest thing, every time you turn on, the screen lights up for a second with that same stronger brightness, as if someone was watching us from inside. I can't explain what I saw that day. There was no way to be someone real, there was no way that reflection appeared for nothing, and there was definitely no way it appeared again on the screen when it was time to restart. Since then, I avoid staying late at school, especially alone in any room with a computer. That marked me in a way I didn't expect. Sometimes, even at home, I find myself looking at the reflection of the screen turned off from the notebook, as if I were waiting to see something new. I've never told this whole story to anyone, but you hear. It seems like something in my head, I know. But I was there, and I swear I saw it. The scariest thing is that days later, I went back to the room just to try to prove to myself that it was an exaggeration, and the same computer now has a small crack on the side of the monitor, as if someone had pressed hard, as if he had tried to get out of there.